Let's recap what's going on with the people of God. The northern kingdom of Israel has been conquered by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom of Judah has been conquered by the Babylonians, which resulted in the destruction of Jerusalem, including the temple, and now a time span of 50 years or so of exile known as the Babylonian captivity. As these people are in exile, the prophets are proclaiming messianism, a divine redeemer that is going to be sent to bring the people out of Babylon back home. A number of lament psalms were written during the Babylonian captivity, cries of anguish, of wanting to be liberated and return home. This brings us to Cyrus the Great. In 539 BC, the Persian Empire, led by Cyrus the Great, conquers the Babylonian Empire. So the Babylonians are no longer part of this class, and now it's the Persians who are running the show. Cyrus saw no reason for the Jews to be exiled and told them to go back home.
Go home.
And just like that, the Babylonian captivity comes to an end.
Like that, that's it.
And the people of God return back to their land. Thus says the Lord to his anointed Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him and strip kings of their robes, to open doors before him, and the gates shall not be closed. I will go before you and level the mountains. I will break in pieces the doors of bronze and cut through the bars of iron. I will give you the treasures of darkness and riches hidden in secret places.
Where did you hide that?
So that you know that it is I, the Lord, the God of Israel, who call you by your name. What you need to understand about Cyrus the Great is that he is a Persian. He worships Persian gods, and he never converts to Judaism. Cyrus the Great saw that there was no advantage, there was no reason to keep the Jews out of the Promised Land, and so he told them to go back home.
Go.
Isaiah is recognizing that God works through the non-Jews. God works through Gentiles to work his ways, to work through this covenant. God works through Gentiles to fulfill his covenant. We've already seen that before in this class. I mean, think of Rahab. Rahab was a Gentile. God worked through her and saved the Jericho spies. So, the Babylonian captivity comes to an end and the exiles are allowed to return home. But here's what's interesting about that. Although the Jews were interested in going back to their home, I mean, who wouldn't be, they were not really eager to rebuild the temple. And a lot of these post-exilic prophets, such as Ezra and Nehemiah and Haggai and Zechariah and Malachi, their focus was on renewing the people of God as a religious community and often trying to get them as a symbol of this unity to build this temple, this second temple. And a lot of people just kind of drag their feet on it.
Quit dragging your feet!
I refer to this post-exilic period, it's the time after the exile, the post-exilic period. I refer to this post-exilic period as the unofficial beginning of Judaism. Now, I know this can be confusing to you because after all, weren't we talking about Judaism for this entire class? Technically, no. We've been focusing on the descendants of Abraham, right? And for most of this class, we've called them the Israelites. When the kingdom became divided, the Israelites were the northern kingdom. And now we're talking about the inhabitants of the southern kingdom, the people of Judah, aka the Jews. And the difference between what the religion was before the exile and what the religion now is kind of subtle. For instance, the previous religion, what we call it the Hebrew faith. The Hebrew faith focused on having a monarchy, that God works through a king to implement his laws, to guide the people against battle. Problem is now, during this post-exilic period, the Persians are running the show. The Jews are not politically independent. They're not allowed to have a king. So let's scratch king off the list there. But Judaism does still recognize the coming of an ultimate Messiah. So they're still keeping that messianism idea alive, but they're not allowed to have a king right now. The Hebrew faith focused a lot on the land, right? And if you are in God's land, you are with God. But if you are not in God's land, there was a mentality that you were without God, that God was absent.
You said you'd always be there for me. But you're not.
Well, the Jews keep getting exiled. We saw this repeatedly in the book of Judges, and we just saw this now at the Babylonians. We'll see this again in the New Testament. Maybe the faith isn't restricted to land. And that's ultimately what the prophets and the Jews are coming to understand. That just because we may not be in the land does not necessarily mean that God is not with us. So God is not localized in any sense. So maybe we should start to downgrade the necessity of the physical land for our salvation. The Hebrew faith was very polytheistic, right? They kept abandoning worship of Yahweh to worship false gods such as the Baals. Judaism is monotheistic. What we see during the post-exilic period is there's really no temptation to worship the false gods anymore. And by the time you get to the New Testament, there's really no references to the Jews worshiping pagan gods. Most significantly, what happens during this post-exilic period of Judaism is that this new faith is obsessed with laws and rituals, following them to the T. Now, here's why. We've learned back in Judges the cycle of apostasy, right? That every time somebody breaks any letter of the law, there is suffering. Well, my friends, we just had over 50 years of exile.
Exile!
And what we learn from books like Joshua and Judges, exile results when people are breaking God's laws. So the Jews do not want to relive an experience of exile once more. So they start to emphasize the necessity of every stroke of every letter of every law. And as long as we're following the law to the T, we're not going to undergo the suffering that we've been going through. We're not going to be exiled anymore. So the prophets and the people thoroughly believed the reason why that exile happened, and the reason why they currently do not have their own king, was because it was a consequence or punishment, if you will, of them breaking the laws. So how do we avert punishment? Stop breaking the law. Stop that! And as I already said, the prophets also wanted to restore the religious community of Judaism. Right? They've been exiled. They've been in foreign territory. Let's build and unite this faith of Jews. We do that through rituals. We did it in the Catholic Church too. It's our rituals that make us unique. If you ever go to Protestant churches, a lot of times it's just sitting and maybe some singing. If you go to a Catholic church, it's that Catholic workout. That up, down, sit, kneel, shake a hand. Go for a walk. Bow. It's rituals. We have our liturgical seasons, rituals. We have our sacraments, rituals. It's rituals that's going to make us a strong community. And the prophets realize, all right, we don't have a king anymore. So what is going to unite us as people of God? Ritual. Proper observance of ritual. So we have a Judaism now being born that is going to be a Judaism that Jesus is going to have to contend with. Contend with? That's an interesting word. Why am I using the word contend with? Well, over the course of the next 500 years, those people who break the law are going to be excluded. There's going to be a whole mentality of judgment and condemnation. The mentality is going to be based around anybody who suffers. And if anybody is suffering, either financially or health-wise, or just misfortune has befallen upon them, the mentality is going to be, you did something against God that deserved that.
What did you do?
And we don't want you to contaminate our community, so we're going to exclude you from our community. My friends, this is the birth of the purity system. The purity system gets born right now during the post-exilic period. And that becomes the system that Jesus has to fight out against. Leviticus 19:2b says, "Be pure as God is pure." That can also be interpreted as, "Be perfect as God is perfect." Leviticus 19:2 is a law that all Jews must follow. And if they are anything less than perfect, they're excluded from community. That's the purity system being born right now, my friends. And Jesus is going to oppose it. And he's going to oppose it with a reworking of Leviticus 19:2b by saying, "Be compassionate as your Father is compassionate."